Hey, well, what is up, everyone? Welcome to another episode of the Faith and Pop Culture Podcast. It is me, your host, Daniel, and I am joined, as I always am, by the croutons to my Caesar salad, Mr. Samuel David Camp. What is up?
Not too much, Daniel. It's good to be with you as always. And who gets a salad except for the croutons? So
I mean, that's what a
I'm
Caesar
happy.
salad is. It's croutons with a bed of lettuce,
Yeah,
just to make you feel
exactly.
better about yourself. But every Caesar salad needs more than lettuce and croutons. It also needs some nice, delicious dressing just to add to the flavor. So adding some dressing to our salad, we're excited to have a special guest on today, a friend of the show that we're always happy to have here, and that is Mr. Nathan Clarkson. He's a filmmaker, an actor, an author, a podcaster, and just an all-around decent guy. Welcome, Nathan. Thank you so much for stopping by the podcast.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm very honored to be the dressing, though I will say I'm more of a Cobb guy. Cobb salads are the best, so I'd prefer if we did a Cobb salad thing today, but it'll be fine. We can move on.
See, I'm like the hill I will die on, and I've fought many battles with this with my wife, is that things associated with breakfast should remain squarely in the breakfast.
Oh, so the
realm
egg, you
today.
can't do it. I see.
Egg and adding, to me, an egg is a breakfast food. So
Yeah,
you start
but
throwing that into-
okay. Well, the thing is, like egg on top of like a burger. I don't know if you've ever had that before.
Can't
Daniel,
do it.
but
Can't do it.
that's where it's
It's
at.
too much goodness all at once.
I know.
That's
your head will
spoken like someone who probably puts pineapple on his pizza, just defiling food from breakfast all the way until dinner. So I think, see, you've been Nathan, you've been around the Collision a bit. You've written for us. We've interviewed you to the point that I assumed you'd already been on this podcast multiple times, and realized before airing that this is your debut on the podcast. Although people familiar with what we're doing at the Collision probably recognize you for talking about your films and various other things. But you just wrote an article for the Collision that we published just not long ago, entitled "A New Market for Authenticity in the Age of AI." So that it's a perfect opportunity just to get you onto the podcast and talk about kind of AI and just kind of your perspective on that, because you are, as you get into the article and we'll get into in the podcast too, you're an actor, you're a filmmaker, you're sort of actively engaged in the arts, and some of the abstract conversations about AI and how it's going to change the industry and change our culture, you're like actively living some of those things. So there'd be I think there's just a lot of interesting stuff we can get into. I know me and Sam have talked about AI in various capacities, but I liked your article because you sort of take a positive approach of not just here's the bad, but what does that mean? What are the good opportunities? So I want to get into a little bit of that. Before we kind of get into the topic of the AI, why don't you share a little bit? I know you're always up to different creative projects. You're making films, writing books, doing stuff. Like, what have you been up to in the last bit, sort of creatively? And like, what can people look forward to, seeing come out from your creative mind?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, as Robert Downey Jr. once said, I don't idle well. So I always like to stay busy because I have way too much ADHD to sit still for too long. So I am up to a good amount of things, as you already know. And we've had you guys on, do a weekly podcast called The Overthinker. So that's always on the burner. It's really fun. So we're going to have you guys back soon. As far as books, I have a book coming out early next year called I'm the Worst. And it's it's fun. It's very personal, interesting cultural studies, all about the really cool concept of admitting your worst and darkest sins and flaws, and how that actually brings about freedom. So I'm really super excited about that. And then just a couple months ago, I wrapped production on a new film. This one is somewhat of a departure from some of my previous films. It's I decided to go pretty artsy, kind of lean into the art house feel and do something that is not hugely commercial, but just something I was super passionate about. And it's kind of written in that that structure of play where it's two characters in dialogue with each other, exploring ideas and concepts, and it's a complicated priest and a Hollywood actress who have a meeting, and so we just wrapped production on that a couple months ago, and we're in the editing process, so that'll be out early next year too, which I'm super excited for, and that's called Act of Contrition. So that's what I'm up to.
Awesome. Yeah, I know. I always
Awesome.
appreciate catching up with you. I know you always have. I feel like every time our paths cross, you have like a dozen other projects that you've been working on, which I love. I know I Am the Worst is the book that my wife's been trying to get me to write, sort of an autobiography memoir. So I'll tell her that that is already being taken. But for kind of the AI stuff, obviously, I feel like most of the conversation, I mean, depending on what circles you're swinging in, but tends to be like when people are talking about AI, it's usually in the negative of
Hmm.
this is why it's going to ruin everything we hold dear. This is why it's going to destroy the industries we love and dehumanize us. And we'll definitely get to some of those concerns. So that is a very valid thing. I thought just to maybe start, like for we're all coming at this from different perspectives. Like obviously, if it was all negative, there wouldn't be a push to make more AI. Like
Hmm.
if it had nothing to offer except for the destruction of civilization, then I think we'd all be pretty unified. That like maybe we should pump the brakes on this technology. But obviously, you know, that's not it's more complicated than that. What do you guys sort of see as like what is the driving like sort of this promised utopia of AI that, eventually the technology will allow this? Like what do you think is sort of the thing that's driving us and just driving our culture to like pursue this more and like, like the benefits that it could offer, particularly in relation to like the arts?
Yeah, this is a super interesting conversation, and one that I feel like that everyone is all of a sudden collectively universally having. But the fascinating thing about it is everyone's having kind of a different conversation because it's affecting everyone's kind of micro world in a different way. I have friends who work in the corporate space and they're talking about how it's affecting their jobs. I have friends who work in finance, I have friends who work in medicine, and they're talking about how AI is kind of changing everything. But, the from my perspective as just an artist, there's a whole different kind of conversation that's circling around the arts. And to start with, you mentioned some of the good things about it. With every new technology that we've ever seen, be it the cars, the internet, whatever it might be, um, there are obviously huge benefits, but with every huge benefit comes a huge drawback. And so you really have these kind of two different things taking place all at once. With the cars, like we are able to travel across country and go places much faster in a short amount of time. And also there are way more deaths from wrecks than we ever had before cars. In fact, 100% more. And you have the internet, right? This is amazing. You can connect with people around the world and you can talk to people and learn. All of human knowledge is on one place. And also you have bullying and pornography, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So terrible things can happen. So you have with AI, you have great things and difficult things. And I think we're all kind of grappling, in particular to my community, the artists, with what are those great things and what are those terrible things going to be. And we're still kind of in that hold your breath space. We're kind of waiting to see. We're seeing beginnings of this having an affect on our work, our careers, our community, but we haven't seen the full culmination of what AI will bring. But just from my perspective, in some of the conversations I've had about this, one of the things I see that is a positive, and I can say this as someone who has made films for a very, very, very long time, and who has written books for a very long time, and who's done by myself a lot of work creatively, and that can be a really tough thing to do, particularly when you have to do 18 different jobs yourself, right? And all of a sudden you have this thing that can come in and actually support you in your vision. So I have this vision to write this thing or to film this thing, but I don't have all these different these different skill sets, and to hire those different skill sets would cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, which just isn't available to the average independent filmmaker. And so when something comes along and it says, I can help you edit things, I can help you color things, I can help you with audio, all of a sudden you're going, oh my gosh, my vision of this movie, let's say, might actually be a reality because I have something at my disposal which is going to support me in my vision. So I think one of the things that AI did is it kind of lowered the barrier of entry for artists to actually pursue their vision.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things too that I've like kind of likened it to sort of digital cameras, um, and just the sort of it's democratized some of that creative process. And I know there's obviously huge concern about like job loss, and you can look back. There's a great documentary on Disney Plus called Light and Magic, where it sort of chronicles basically that job loss because of CGI, and so now you're not doing all the modeling and all that. So yes, there are those, I think, downsides, but like you said, I think it is interesting that it can sort of unleash more creativity of more people at one time, which I think is kind of fascinating.
Yeah, and even just I mean, for full disclosure, this podcast episode, at least in partnership, we use AI tools to help edit, like at least the initial sweep through, like just saves us a lot of time so that we can use that time creating, and like, it actually opens up the doors for some of that, or even just I think some of the narrative that like AI is just like purely wholesale the death of creativity just isn't the case. Like I know my wife, she teaches art, a high school art teacher. She also does like the yearbook. She like develops the yearbook, and that's like a whole class, a whole thing that they do. And like she'll use AI just not to make the book or the images, but just to like brainstorm. Hey, give what are some title ideas or some section, and it will give all this stuff, and it does a lot of that initial. And then she'll take that and she'll change it and discuss it, and that will spark conversations. And like I think with most things, and I think we all know, like it's not the tool, it's how you use the tool. That definitely does apply, but I think in some ways too, I think some of the driving, at least as like a consumer perspective, like the driving impetus to some of like the AI stuff is like that it really is to me just the culmination of sort of this shift to very like just like a culture of like individualism of like we can like we live in a culture that's more and more just cater everything to me. Like, I want everything at my fingertips. I want to be able to adjust. The algorithms are going to tell me just give me what I want to hear, and I'm going to be able to see this. And like, like there is a world probably not that far away where like, the music listening experience can like not only do we have algorithms and stuff to like point you to the right songs, but like it will like create the songs. Hey, you want to hear some power metal song, about Viking, conquest, like because who doesn't? And it will generate that, and you can listen to that, or like I think it's not surprising to me, and I think there is an appeal to that of like, what if like music, like obviously I'm not going to go to some famous artist and like I don't have the clout to like write me an album on this story, but if I could generate whole concept albums about the Lord of the Rings and have it be this power metal anthem and opera, like I don't know, like there's like an appeal to some of that of like the control and just like the opportunities that like the average person doesn't have, that like I don't know, like the ethics and the what that does to the industry and the creators, that conversation aside, there is some exciting stuff with AI and the arts to like, and obviously that depends on the art it's making reaching a level where it's not just garbage. Like it has to be good. And we'll kind of get into that a little bit, but I understand the push for AI despite all the concerns. But speaking of those concerns, I wanted to ask you, Nathan, because I know um, you have your foot in sort of the entertainment world as far as acting and filmmaking. Without going like too inside baseball for that, like I know the whole writer's strike, and stuff. Like there were a lot of reasons for that in Hollywood, but like a big part of that was what do we do with AI? Actors, writers, people trying to protect themselves from being replaced by just AI technologies, and just putting some like barriers and some gates. So as far as sort of like there's good things for AI. As far as like the concerns and like the fears, what's been your experience for that? Just talking to people, or as someone that like is on the front lines as far as the arts go, of that actually like affecting you.
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, it was just a few years ago that there was this huge actors strike, and a big part of this actors strike was with the studios in relation to usage of AI. And the technology, if any of the listeners out there have seen kind of what AI can do, there's a worry that the technology will get to a place to where you don't really need actors anymore. And that's already been happening with background actors, right? There's on background actors submissions, they literally have now a check and say, are you willing to be scanned? And what they do is they scan the background actor, and then they dress that background actor up digitally in different clothes, and they put that background actor in all these different scenes throughout the movie, which means they only have to pay that background actor for one day, where traditionally that background actor would have worked 15, 30, 50 days. And so that's kind of a worry just on a practical financial reality. It's like, oh, well, there goes, I got paid for one day, but there goes my image, and they were able to use me for the entire shoot without actually paying me, in a way that I could sustain myself in this particular role. But even foreground actors are now kind of worried, as I don't know if you've seen, but there have been a lot of like celebrity recreations, and they're pretty convincing, to be completely honest. As I scroll through Twitter, I'll be like, oh, look, Tom Cruise is giving an interview. Oh, no, that's not. Now he, just, turned into Superman and flew off or something like that. Obviously, it was AI, but it does trick you to where for a moment it looks real. And, we're still at the beginning of the technology. And so there is a real worry with actors that you're not really going to need us anymore. And so we have poured decades. I went to acting school. I've studied acting for 15 plus years. I've studied the different methods. I have honed my craft. And aside from that is my passion. I love the art of thespian. I love being a thespian. I love acting. And so a lot of these people, both their passions and their work and their investment, are going, oh, this could kind of disappear in a second where I'm no longer needed. Now, I don't believe that to be the case. I have some caveats with the downsides that I hear people worrying about, but we'll get to those in a minute. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on what you've seen, even just particularly in the artistic world, with maybe some of the worries that people should be or are when it comes to mixing AI with art.
Yeah, well, and I think, and you sort of touched on it too. Like, I think part of what makes these conversations complicated is like they affect different people in different ways. Like replacing background actors with, and I know there's been like there's one, at least one that went viral, not that like in the last year or so, of like a Disney Plus show. It's like some sports movie, and there's a bunch of like, PlayStation 2 graphic looking characters in the stands, but it happens so quick that you don't necessarily notice. But when you do, you're like, oh my goodness, like this is awful. Like, and it's like, well, if in one hand, like, if you're a background actor, that now you're just some terrible CG, AI person, that's a negative impact. If you're a filmmaker, then you can now make this movie, and, you can free you up or other people, then like that's actually a benefit for you. Then, you're saving your efforts. And so I think that's when it becomes like where some of the different perspectives is not just that people disagree, but it's they're affecting people in different ways that,
Yeah.
and I feel like that's what makes even some of like because we'll kind of get into a bit too, like as far as like what does this mean for the church, and I think that's some of the concerns too, that it's, you can frame it as a positive or a negative depending on who you include of being impacted for. And I think, as Christians, we sort of need to, as much as possible, have that big picture of like, yes, this is good for me, and I'm creative now, and I can do this that I couldn't do. Not good for these people. Do I need to care about these people? What about you, Sam? I know in our previous conversations, I don't know exactly where you fall, Nathan. I know me and Sam, like Sam's a bit more optimistic about AI than I tend to be. I think we have a lot of the same concerns and stuff. I tend to be more like it's bad and we don't need it. And Sam tends to be more like, hey, but this is good, and more optimistic about it. Like, what do you sort of see some of the concerns and things going on?
Yeah, I mean, I think like with any technology, it's a mixed bag, right? And um, I think there's some really interesting stuff happening with it. I don't know, like I think it's also, I don't know, I feel like it's enabling certain things, and I don't even know if it, because I was at like a film uh industry trade show thing, and they were showing off some of the ways that you can like use these I forget even what it's not a cyc wall, it's Nathan, you'd probably know, like the volume, I think is maybe the most um, recognizable example of this, which is what they use to film Mandalorian. And so basically I got to see like a much smaller version of that. And because of AI, or at least algorithms, again, AI is kind of a catch-all at this point, but it would know like where the talent is, where the background is, and where the camera is, and then also be able to in real time like track those shots. And so it looks, you know, it looks like you're immersed in that scene of like the back alley in Tokyo, but it's really just you standing in front of a giant screen.
Mm.
But the screen is going out of focus like it ought to if you were there, basically. So it's doing some of these really technical things that like enable you to get the shot that you would never be able to afford, or maybe never even think to get. And so I think there's things like that that I think are really, really good. And it just sort of unlocks creative potential. But then, yeah, I think maybe on the talent side of it, I think it is concerning. But there's always that, well, like at what level, like are we replacing like the lead character in movies? I don't I don't think that will ever happen. Like it might. And there may be some small films that try, um, but then also it's like my mind goes more to like the animation stuff,
Yeah.
because I feel like that's a place where you could maybe make an animated movie all by yourself.
Yeah.
Just about, right? And it's like you don't need you lose the uncanny valley stuff, the weird pixelated person in the background. But you could do a really simple animation, and it could be a compelling story, and you could do it all yourself, and you can create your own voice actors to do it, and it's just you know, in your apartment making this, and it could actually be compelling. And it's like, do we not want that? Or like, I mean, like that person wasn't gonna like he wasn't gonna go and fundraise to make this movie for, $10 million anyways. And so I don't know. I mean, I think there's a lot of conflicting feelings about it. But I don't know, like,
Yeah, and I think I feel like animation is a great one because that
Yeah.
you do lose some of the things that keep people from like hesitant about it. I think music is another one. And you mentioned in your article, Nathan, like I feel like right now, like the voice is the part that's still I don't know if you would call it uncanny valley for audio, but like the equivalent of that of like,
Yeah.
hey, I'm convinced that this is real when I hear the guitars and the drums and stuff. Like, but once they start singing, there's just an artificial
Mhm.
sound and the way the voice moves between notes and stuff. Like, it's like, well, that's still, not like, but I mean, that's a bridge that will probably be crossed at some point. Like currently, that's still, where I feel like music is probably that will be quicker, like an AI band, as opposed to like, hey, now we're just gonna have AI Tom Cruise for the next 80 years. Like, I don't think that's necessarily, even though that gets more of the attention. Like, I think the music and stuff. I think where I fall some of on this is maybe I just have a low view of like humanity. That like I'm like, yes, there are a lot of good stuff, and like, hey, I think that's a biblical to have a low view of humanity. But like the because like even I don't know if you guys saw there was a chart that was released like a couple of weeks ago, I think, that kind of went viral on social media, just like tracking like the OpenAI, like the usage and stuff. And like it's like an imperfect chart, and it's impossible to really map it all out. But like from what they did and how they mapped it, like right like at the end of June, just like plummets,
Mm.
and like the usage, and people are like, what happened then? And like the consensus is like that's when school got out. Like that so much of this AI has been students and college, like people using it for
Wow.
because if you look into the chart too, it even goes down on the weekends. Like it essentially maps like the school usage because people are using it. I mean, and some of them are maybe using it legitimately. I know my wife's a teacher, and there's ways that they're using it, encouraging people to use it. But I think a lot of it is like, let's be honest, like people are
Yeah.
they're having AI write their essay because it's easier to do that and play video games than to have to write it yourself. Like, I do think that for me, I always just come back to, yes, there's good things. I just don't trust people to use them for good things
Yeah.
because I feel like at the end of the day, we're selfish and we want to use it for selfish things that save us time, save us money, let us be comfortable, let us not have to deal with stuff. And that's kind of where I keep coming back to for even like the church, like, like I don't know what you guys, if you guys have thought much about that, like just sort of the incorporation of AI in like a Christian context of like, yes, I can see definite benefits to, a lot of, unless you're a big mega church, like resources are sparse and you're trying to be a good steward of, hey, if I can, this grandma's giving me all her money she has left to tithing, and, if I can save that money for missions and use AI to do all this other work, like you can definitely do the gymnastics and make it a very, like, the biblical thing to do is to use as much AI as possible. Like
Yeah.
you can do that. I just wonder, like, some of the other side of that, like this sort of that dehumanization, like, I don't know, like having like worship music that's written generated by AI, and it's like, well, it's clearly, its heart wasn't in it. Like it's AI algorithm heart. Like,
Well, to be fair to modern worship music, was it already?
Oh, shots
You know,
fired.
so I think, I mean, yeah, I think that can be. I think it's going to come down to like individuals, because it's like I don't think anybody would say we need to not have the internet.
Yeah.
Like I don't think anybody can make that case, right? Like we shouldn't have the internet. It's, because some people use it to do bad things, therefore we shouldn't have it. And so I think the same with like I think the difference is we have a hard time with like exponentials. Like we can't really wrap our mind around exponential growth or exponential spread of anything. And so I think that is the thing that is different with AI, is just the speed with which it can and has changed. And I think that's maybe more the thing that we're needing to wrestle with, beyond just the fact that it helps us do things faster or with less capital. I don't know, Nathan,
yeah, and I
you
think
can.
too, and then I'll throw this to you, Nathan, like, because this is sort of the thrust of your article too, is like, I feel like the part that keeps people hesitant or the concern is just that, like, detachment from real humanity. Like, I think there is a very valid concern that, like, digital world is great, so many things we can do with this technology, like, but just sort of this fear that like everything is losing its direct, whether it's specifically AI or just the digital world, and we're all in our own silos, and we interact, through screens rather than we do through, through people. And I think even just like for me, like I've listened to like, without knowing at first, like some AI generated like power metal, and it's like, this is kind of good. Like, some of the music's kind of good, and like, and then you hear like the vocals, and it's like, okay, it's clearly either they're really auto tuning this or it's not right. And it's like, even for me, it's like, even, okay, figure out it's AI, like just the knowledge of like, this wasn't created by a human, even if the music itself is sort of mostly convincing, there's this still that aspect of like, there's just something wrong about like, this isn't like, I'm interacting with like a computer rather than like, the creative process. Like I think there is sort of some of that concern, and I know, Nathan, and I can let you speak on this too, but like sort of that uncanny valley of like, there's something inside of us, at least now. Like I know the technology, we don't know how good it's going to get, but like at least now there still is that, like, your brain kind of knows this isn't necessarily true, and like it almost like resists. It seems like it does, like resists. Like, this is not natural. This is not how things are supposed to be. Like, what are some of your, because a lot of your article is sort of based on just sort of that realization of like this, the ickiness of like, there's this thing not quite right about this.
Yeah, that's a great question. That's something I have been wrestling with myself for a while, almost as existentially, for forgetting my livelihood or my public image or my career. Just thinking about it on kind of this like philosophical level. Like if I can type into AI, write me a movie, and it can do it in 3 seconds, why should I do anything? Why am I here? And what am I doing? And what I came to is I think that AI will replace art. And let me say this with a few nuances. It will replace bad art. The art that you don't think about, the art that you just want to consume like a snack. I think it will, and that's easily replaceable. And to be honest, even before AI, it was already formulaic. It was already a bunch of people sitting around a table, not having an artistic moment or a deep thought, or from some beautiful and depth-filled place for their soul. It was people in a corporate room saying, "We got to make a song that sounds like this." That was basically just an early formation of what AI will do, which will create very formulaic, consumable, and probably at some point popular art. And that's just fine. I know that worries a lot of people, but I think that's kind of inevitable. I think AI will take over writing the pop songs that just have kind of a mechanism or an equation to get there. What I don't think AI will touch is good art. And I'm gonna kind of evidence this in a couple different more just anecdotal ways. But one, as I think about food, I know this is really funny as food was as factories kind of popped up um during kind of factory created food during the beginning of the 20th century, and we saw that food was able to be mass produced, packaged. It would keep longer. I guess you could have had a thought that maybe this is going to replace chefs, right? That chefs would no longer be needed, machines can make all this food. And while I like a Twinkie as much as the next guy, New York is filled with restaurants. All
Amen.
you have are chefs charging $1,000 a plate, for these beautiful creations. And part of the reason you go to it is because it's quality and it's good, and it's made by someone who put care into it. And so I think that when it comes to art, AI will be able to replicate Twinkie. They'll be able to replicate Doritos and Cheetos and Fritos. They'll be able to get the snack food. But when it comes to beautiful, good, nutritious, high experience art, I think that's going to be reserved for humans forever. Because here's the thing, you can replicate, and that's what AI does. It replicates, it amalgamates and replicates things. But I think at the end of the day, what I know about humans is that they're very interested in other humans. Half the reason people listen to Taylor Swift isn't just because she wrote a catchy song. It's because she is who she is, and she's formed a mythos around herself with her dating life and her living life and everything she does. And you want to hear kind of her diary when you go and listen to her music. And while it might be catchy, you're really there to hear her. And even when it comes to acting, I want to go watch a movie not with someone who can do a really good imitation. If that was true, we could just get a lot of Tom Cruise lookalikes and put them in acting school and say, great, now we can do 5 Tom Cruise movies at one time. No, I want to go see Tom Cruise because there's something ineffably interesting and magnetic about him. I want to see Tom Cruise in a movie because I know that he is him. And so I think there's this human element that you're never going to be able to separate from art, is that when we engage with art, we're engaging not just with the piece, not just with the song, the painting, the movie, we're engaging with the mind and the eternal soul behind it. And I think whether or not we can articulate this as viewers, as culturally speaking, I think that is the reason why many people engage with art and ultimately have favorite artists. You know, when I go to the Met, the Met's an art museum here in the city, and I try to regularly go. And when I do, what I'm fascinated with is as I'm walking around looking at all these, endless halls of beautiful, beautiful paintings, there's something that I took note of last time that me and my wife and my friends do when we go. And you look at a piece, you come across a piece that's like, oh my goodness, this is beautiful, and you take it in, you look at it, you don't just walk off. What you do, or at least what I do, is I go, who painted this? And I go and I see the person, John Smith. I go, who was John Smith? And I want to know about John Smith. And then I want to know about what led him to paint this, what was going on in his life, what was going on in history. And so there's something that was more than the painting that drew me in. Of course, the painting is objectively, in a vacuum, something beautiful, but it's even more beautiful. And I was drawn to it because of the story behind why it was painted. And I think that's going to be true of songs, of movies, of acting. People want to connect with other humans, and we do so through the vehicle of art. And so I don't think that we ever have to worry that AI is going to replace art. I simply don't, because I know that humans are interested in humans. And when we go to art, we're looking for catharsis, and we're also looking for, has someone else had this experience? Can someone else walk with me through this? And the artist does that with the viewer. AI will not provide that comfort, that satiation, that connection, that an artist who created something and offers it to the world can. So all that to say is, I think that AI will get rid of, not get rid of, but replace shallow, kind of easy popcorn art. I think it probably will happen. It's way cheaper to make it that way. And but why I know that's scary for a lot of people. The cool thing is that that's going to put a premium on good art. And so this should scare bad artists who phone it in, who haven't put in the work, who haven't dedicated to their craft, who aren't creating honestly. But this should actually encourage people who are, who have become masters and students of excellence and beauty, because this will only create a higher premium for your services as true, good, human, beautiful quality art. So that's kind of my take on where this might end up. Do you guys agree? Disagree? What do you think?
Oh, totally disagree. No, I'm just kidding. Um, yeah, I mean, I'm with you with that. Like, I think like the prevalence, the more widespread like of sub-quality is, and like bad art and just sort of mundane, normal, like really that only just goes to amplify the quality of good art. Like I think even um obviously a different situation, but even like the technology allowing like self-publishing. Like again, I've self-published myself, I've published with publishers, like, but just the fear that this would sort of now everyone can publish now. So like we're just gonna all there's gonna be all these books, we're gonna kind of lose that whole industry. And it's like you sort of see the book like it's allowed authors that wouldn't have the opportunity, and we've discovered some great authors through that process of giving them the tools to actually get out there and break out of the system and stuff. But I mean, there's also just a lot of self-published slop on people that just say it's so easy now, just write a story over the weekend and publish it. And like it hasn't necessarily replaced or like diminished the, if anything, it's almost made us appreciate more like the authors that are just really gifted and quality storytellers. And like it's sort of amplified, pointed us towards like the good stuff because we're so immersed in stuff that it isn't. And I just think even just biblically, I think we like there is sort of like an incarnational, like a physical quality to the way we are created, that we were created, it's not good for man to be alone, or just, Christ, the incarnation itself of Christ becoming flesh, like just that tangible, physical, like, embodiment of of our souls. I feel like that's how we were created, that like innately, whether we recognize it as being, because of God or just for whatever, like there is sort of that drive to like connect to other people and like the arts and the music. And like you said, Nathan, is Taylor Swift the best songwriter to ever live? Like probably not. Like I don't know. I think if in a vacuum, if you just sort of heard her songs, didn't know who she was, like I don't think she'd probably still be popular, but like I don't think she's the mega transcendent star that she is now. Like because so much of that is the mystique, or like you said with Tom Cruise, like you know if, a CGI sort of Tom Cruise AI hanging off of an airplane, or like that loses all of the mystique of why the Mission Impossible
Yeah.
movies wow us. It's like, hey, this guy was like 70 years old and he's jumping off a cliff on a motorbike. Like, I need to go see that on a big screen, like because of sort of that human. Like he actually did this. This happened. Like the behind the scenes almost is incredible as like the actual filming. So like I'm with you as far as just I think there is always going to be that drive, like to connect our experience with something that is human. And I think even like the irony is like technology allows us almost to do that more. Like we can engage every, my social media feeds are filled with a bunch of metal bands and tour videos and stuff, like in ways that I can follow who they are behind the music when I probably couldn't have done that 10 years ago. Like I actually have more of that connection. But what are you saying? Like, like, do you think AI will be able to replace some of that connection? Like, how do you sort of see that playing out?
Yeah, I mean, I think as it relates to the arts, I feel like it is going to be more. I think you'll see it probably more in an augmented way. So like it's assisting more people create more stuff because now you don't need a whole team of people to do a certain thing, like say a movie or an animation or even a video game for that matter. Like I think I just saw the other day where it was like I think somebody had recreated like Red Dead Redemption, but it was like spontaneous map generation, like as you were, so it was like
Wow.
creating the world as you're like walking through it, basically. And again, I'm not a video game designer, so I don't understand any of that stuff. But I think I think what people will connect with as it relates to AI is if as long as there's a human in the loop. And so I could see, maybe you're a talented singer, but you don't know how to play any instruments.
Mm,
Well, I think now there's a lot of tools out there that will enable you to create the tracks that you hear in your head,
mm,
right? Whereas before you'd have to go and take lessons and just, play your fingers raw on the guitar until you figure it out. And, there's all this friction involved in honing your craft which, maybe that's a good thing, maybe that's a bad thing, but I also think that there's new tools available that allow you to express yourself in ways that I think previously were not possible. And so, like, if you have this song or a poem or whatever and you want to put music to it, you can now sort of do that on your own. And I think probably in the next little while be able to do that really, really well and I think because there's a human involved, but you're sort of being augmented by what the computer can do, which to be honest, I mean that's been happening, at various levels. And so I think it's one of those things where I think that will be the thing that really sets I think the new bar for creativity in the future. And I think that'll be the thing that people connect with more so than just purely generative AI, whatever,
yeah.
music or art or movies. Yeah.
Yeah, because I've always thought of like again, perhaps I know it's more nuanced than this, but like the closest equivalent to me has always been like a DJ. Like it's like that's sort of what AI is doing. It's remixing it. Like they're involved, but a lot of it's sort of through computer. They're not necessarily creating all. I know DJs do a lot more stuff too, but like sort of that idea of like, and then there's some that use those tools better, and we know who they are. There's others who aren't as qualified with that, and where like there is an art and an intentionality involved. I don't think it's necessarily at the same level as like, the Beatles or like, real trend-setting, talented musical artists, but there still is, I mean, in the version that you're saying, Sam, like there still sort of is that intentionality, that human quality that there's something to latch on to where we don't feel quite as, like, distanced or, dehumanized from. Maybe kind of last thing for some of this is sort of this with the church. Like I know because Nathan, you get into it a little bit in your article, but just sort of the opportunity of, hey, there's like a new market, in a world that doesn't offer authenticity or even just human connection, and it's sort of all digital and it's all AI and it's generative. Like there will be sort of this new market for people that do hunger for,
Mm,
for some of those things that we fear that we've lost, which is always why I've been somewhat like a feet dragger on some of the adoption, like perhaps I think to a fault of like, hey, yes, the church should be relevant and keep up with trends and all that tools and not fall behind. And I just don't know if we should be too quick to
mm,
like just give the world more of what they already have everywhere else. Like I think as the world goes more this direction, maybe the best thing to do is to like plant our flag or go the other direction? Or what do you sort of see as, because sort of that market, like the hunger, and maybe specifically for the arts, but also just like for the church, like sort of what is that opportunity for us as things move this way to offer something perhaps different?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I guess I would answer it very similarly for both the arts and the church, the community of believers. I think that, kind of building off of what I was talking about, I think that essentially we long for authenticity. We long for real. I think that's a desire that God has placed in our hearts, and I think we can see it. We can see it evidenced in every person we meet. We long for realness, for truth, for connection, and I think that when it comes to um, art, and when it comes to the church, I think that both of those things. I talk about this in my book, Finding God in Hollywood, that both art, particularly Hollywood, and the church have both sought to answer kind of the deepest longings and questions of the human heart, psyche, mind, etc. And I think that if you're going to do that well, you're going to offer them something real. And in a world in which there is, and this has been going on from way before AI was invented, right? We've had this sense of fakeness or lack of authenticity for quite a while. In fact, the word authenticity came, kind of had this huge comeback actually pre-AI. That it was a huge thing to say authentic, both in commercials or even like in books. Was a really authentic author who wrote in an authentic way, raw, real, whatever it was. All those kind of buzzwords were already on the comeback before AI got introduced just a few years ago, kind of to the mass culture. But people really desire and long for something real. And we see this even kind of wrapped up in studies that more and more people are buying collections of DVDs. We stream everything now. Yet all of a sudden you have this huge uptick in people going and buying physical DVDs because they want something to hold, something real, something that isn't just ephemeral and gone. We see this with CDs, no, not CDs, records, in fact, which are outselling CDs for the first time in like, I don't know, decades. We see a move towards people homesteading. We see a move towards people learning how to cook, and actually make their own food. There is a desire with humans to be connected to something real. And I think what the church can do is exactly what you said, Daniel, is not just offer more of the same, which is what culture is going to offer, which is more packaged, formulaic things, but rather we can offer an authenticity and a connection to something true and real. And so I think that's where I get with the AI conversation, is that AI will make a lot of things easier. It'll make a lot of things worse. That's just going to happen no matter what. We really can't stop the march of technology. But the one thing that we can do as artists and Christians and a community of believers is offer the world something that actually connects with the deepest longing of the human heart, which is something true and real. And I think both in art and our churches, that ought to be kind of front and center of what we're doing when we think about what we're making and offering to the people who either buy or step into or engage with our art, or engage with and step into our churches. And so I guess that's kind of where I come to, is that we have a responsibility as artists and believers to offer something true and real. And this will be something that's not going to ever be beat or outcompeted. The church is still around thousands of years later because at the end of the day, through all of these decades, we have offered something true and real and continue to do so imperfectly. But we continue to do so, and that continues to connect to the truest desire of the human heart.
Yeah, and I think yeah, and just to add to that too, like, I feel like the human heart has not changed.
Yes.
I feel like there's a tendency to be very reactionary, where like every new thing is like, okay, like for thousands of years there's been technology advancements and there's been wars and there's been political changes and natural change and all these different things. And I feel like there's sort of a in the moment, like, recency bias of like, but like this is the thing that will forever change the like, and then the next big thing that comes up is sort of, well, this is going to be the thing that forever changes who we are. And like, I feel like obviously it changes our experience, but like the longings of the heart have not changed. Like
Yeah.
the need for, like for community has not changed just because now we can connect digitally or we can be more siloed. Or I think we even saw that with through COVID and the digital church and stuff. Like the desire to actually be in the room with fellow believers.
Yeah.
It's like, well, just because we can watch the service without doing that doesn't change that need to, that the experience we get. And so I do think I do share some of your optimism, Nathan. I'm just like, hey, you know what? It's definitely going to be a different situation, different challenges specifically to like navigate. But I just think the needs for humans have not changed. And like in some ways, if the church can be sensitive to that, like
Mm,
this is actually an exciting opportunity to like, hey, the culture more and more, there's sort of this dissatisfaction. I think even you see that with like Hollywood, like a lot of just people tired of a lot of these movie or Marvel movies or whatever, like you know, just sort of this like, yeah, it's all spectacle and it's all fine. It's just, I don't know, there's something missing from it. It just feels disconnected. Like, I feel like you're going to get more and more of that sort of dissatisfaction of just like discontent of like, yeah, I can do all this stuff. It's, it seemed really fun to have these like AI friends that I could,
eh,
or an AI girlfriend or all these different things. And they just talk to me. And like, I just think the novelty of that stuff is going to wear
yeah.
off. And there's just going to be like, well, you know what? Like, it's not actually satisfying what I want. And like it kind of gave me a buzz and it had these exciting possibilities. And but like now that it's everywhere, it's not as exciting as it was a year ago or 2 years ago to do this. Like maybe I should call up my friend and actually have a conversation with him. So I do think as the church there is there's a ton of opportunities for us to like, kind of step into that void that's going to continue to be left by our culture.
Yes.
And I think, I think there's exciting, I think the church can experience a big growth of just, hey, we have the thing that people want. And the less the world, pretends to offer that or tries to offer that, the more people are going to come to our churches to look for that. But one thing I know that we have that people want is what Nathan has on his mind of things he likes. Which brings us to the final segment of this podcast episode. We have things we like that you should like too. So Nathan, as our guest of honor, someone that I assume likes many of great things, we will allow you to share just one thing that you lately have been liking that you think the rest of us peons out here would be, our experience should be elevated to like as well.
Oh man, this was tough because I actually had like I think like 3 or 4 things came to my mind of things I've been liking recently, which is pretty good. Usually I only like 1 or 2 things in a season, but I'm really liking 3 or 4 right now. So I'm gonna have to whittle them down to one. Ooh, that's rough. Okay, I'm gonna go with a series I watched over the summer with my family. This is actually deals with some of these questions in the future and technology and what happens and what it'll look like. But I have never been a Trekkie. I didn't grow up on it. I never really watched it. I was always a Star Wars guy. But while I was home with my family, we ended up watching this show that apparently has amazing like critical rating and audience rating, and it's called Star Trek: Strange New Worlds. And it's a perfect introductory to someone who doesn't know all the characters and doesn't know all the history and the lore. Um, but aside from that, so you can it's approachable as a total noob, because what it is this like episodic once a week thing where this really fun ragtag group of I don't know what you call them, not astronauts, space people in a ship called the Discovery go to different worlds, and there's every single episode is a different world that they visit because they're out exploring, and it has different philosophical questions. With there's a whole culture who's never heard of this, or there's a whole culture who only has this, and what does this mean for ethics and morality, and so it's humans kind of grappling with these big questions, but they do it in a really fun way. And just all the characters are developed in a really interesting and colorful way, so you actually kind of feel um connected to them, and there's someone everyone can love. And best of all, for all you Christian moms and dads out of there, it's pretty I will say it's pretty clean, pretty family friendly. And so I was able to find a really good family friendly, fun, imaginative but thought-provoking show. So I really have enjoyed watching Captain Pike and his whole crew in Star Trek: Strange New Worlds.
And where can people stream that? I'm assuming it's
Paramount
streaming.
Plus is putting it out. And so,
Okay.
yeah, it's a Paramount Plus show that I didn't really know about until I stumbled upon it with my family. So, stumble upon it with yours.
Awesome.
Were you a Trekkie, Sam? I can't
No,
remember if we've had
I
this
was a Star
conversation.
Wars guy myself. Yeah.
Yeah, I never really got into like I like the J.J. Abrams Star Trek, which is like the ones that real Trekkies are mad
They
because they're nothing like Star Trek. Like the stuff that's Star Trek, but it's like Star Wars. We did when I was first married, me and my wife, we started watching through like the original Star Trek,
Whoa.
and I've always wanted to like. I know there's so many shows and stuff, and I think my wife was a Trek. She used to watch a lot of Star Trek, but I've always wanted to sort of get into that world. And I feel like now that I'm like a bit older, like, when you're a kid, it's like, oh, why aren't they shooting laser guns at each other and have laser swords and stuff? Like, I feel like now that I'm a bit older, like there's so much about Star Trek I feel like I would get into,
Because
but I've never.
it was always designed more as like a philosophical show, I
Yes.
think, right? Like they were always kind of like, well, so what would happen if this were the case?
Yes.
So way more than just, cowboys and Indians in space.
Yes.
Which was what Star Wars was, basically.
Yeah, I think there's so much. So maybe I will. Maybe at some point I need to. Maybe this will be what gets me back into the.
It's
or
fun. It's
originally
approachable.
into the Star Trek.
You don't have to know everything of the lore, because I certainly don't. So that was one of the reasons I enjoyed it, because you can just kind of jump in.
Well, we hope if you guys
Awesome.
are not Trekkies out there, take it straight from Nathan that this is the show to get you to create new Trekkies, because we definitely need more of that. But speaking of Nathan and new things and just all that you're doing, always appreciate you stopping by the channel in whatever capacity and finally getting you on the podcast, share what you're up to. For people that want to just like follow your work, like you said, you have a new film coming out, you have a book coming out. Like, what's the best way for people to kind of follow your work and connect with you?
Yeah, absolutely. You can go to my website at nathanclarkson.me. You can search my name, Nathan Clarkson, on any of the socials. You can also read my column where I occasionally, I'm going to do it more, write about the intersection of faith and art, called Cross Cultural on Pathos. And you can listen to my podcast where me and a friend talk about literally everything with literally everyone. It's called The Overthinkers. But yeah, that's where you can get in touch with me and see what I'm up to.
Yeah, and I
Right.
mean, I've heard rumors that your podcast now and then will even have some pretty big name guests on,
Yeah.
such as
Like
myself.
Mr. Dr. Daniel Blackaby.
I definitely popped over there, and Joseph is the podcast. He has been on our podcast. Joseph Holmes has been on at least once, so some of the listeners may know him. So could you guys check out that? Check out Nathan's work. We'll link all your books and websites and stuff in the discussion. But I know you always have a lot going on, and in this AI dehumanized world, we'll help people have a human connection with you. But thanks for joining us, and thanks everyone for tuning in once again. We hope you'll join us next Thursday, every Thursday, for more conversations on faith and pop culture.